Could Canon or another company beat the Sony A7R IV or the Sony A9II for wildlife photography in 2020? Let's talk about it. So there's no doubt about it. In the last few years, Sony has been killing it. They've certainly been making waves with their pro mirrorless cameras, the A7 line of cameras and the A9 line of cameras. And in the meantime, we've been waiting for Canon or Nikon to jump in to the mirrorless game, at least at the pro level, and it hasn't happened. Last year in 2019, Sony really killed it, especially with the A7R IV. That 61 megapixel sensor really made a lot of people sit up and take notice, and it was the impetus for a lot of people to switch to Sony. However, they also released the A9II, and that was a bit of a disappointment to a lot of people, at least in the wildlife photography game. Some people were also expecting that Sony might release a pro-level APS-C camera, and that didn't happen. Now, in 2020, we're looking at the possibility, according to the rumors, that Canon might release at least one, if not multiple, EOS mirrorless, pro mirrorless cameras. And one of the rumors is that they might release a camera with a 70 or 80 megapixel sensor. And based on the reactions that we saw around the A7R IV and its 61 megapixel sensor, 70 or 80 megapixels, which is definitely within the realms of possibility, because if you look at, say for example, the APS-C sensor that they have in the M6 Mark II, if you scale that up, right, you end up somewhere around there at 70 or 80 megapixels. So 2020 looks like it could be a battle royale between Canon and Sony. Sony have said that they want to be the #1 camera company by 2021, and I'm sure Canon has other ideas. One of the things that's interesting too is if you look at the lens mounts, if you look at the RF mount and the Nikon Z mount, those lens mounts, the specifications of those mounts allows those manufacturers to do some interesting things in terms of lens design, and already Canon have released some pretty interesting RF lenses, and some of the ones that have been announced to be coming out soon or rumored to be coming out soon look equally, if not more, interesting. So what is Sony going to do if Canon releases a pro mirrorless camera, especially something with a high resolution sensor in 2020? Like, they just released new models of the A7 and the A9 in 2019, so they're unlikely to release new models again in 2020. We can expect them to release more telephoto lenses, though I think if they don't do that, that would be a surprise. And in the wildlife photography game, there's a lot of things that are still missing in Sony's lens lineup, like a 500 f4, a 300 2.8, 200 f2. So that is something that we really do expect to happen. Now, one thing we should also look at as a bit of an indicator is the 1DX Mark III that Canon have recently announced. It's not a fully mirrorless camera. It does have some mirrorless capabilities, and it has 20 frames per second. It has a huge buffer. It doesn't have IBIS, doesn't have an EVF. Now, it does have deep learning autofocus, but it only works on human subjects. And that's one thing that we shouldn't forget, is that, especially for wildlife photographers, Sony has animal eye autofocus. And it's still very much a first generation technology, but it really is an asset if you're a wildlife photographer. And if they keep developing that and improving it and making it as good as their IAF is for humans, it could be really interesting. And I think if Canon or any other company is going to compete with Sony in the pro mirrorless game, they really need to figure out, at least for wildlife photography, how to get some equivalent capability in there, equivalent to animal eye autofocus. So what about other companies? Well, Nikon is in trouble in terms of their finances. There's been no indication that they're going to release pro mirrorless cameras in 2020. If we look further afield, Micro Four Thirds, it's a different game, but there are some interesting things happening. Olympus have announced that they are going to release a 150 to 400 f4.5 lens, and a lot of the advantages in terms of weight and size savings in Micro Four Thirds come with the longer lenses, the bigger lenses, and they've also said that they're going to release more telephoto lenses as well. So all in all, 2020 looks like it's going to be a very interesting year, and as wildlife photographers, we can only benefit from any competition. So I would love to hear from you guys. What do you think is going to happen, and how does it affect you? Have you been waiting for something? Perhaps, for example, if you're a Canon user right now, and maybe you had been looking at Sony, do these recent rumors about what Canon might do in 2020, do they give you pause for thought? If you were a Canon user before and you switched to Sony, are you now thinking, oh, perhaps maybe I shouldn't have switched? What about if you're a Nikon user? Personally, most of the people that I've seen switch to Sony have come from Nikon and not from Canon. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please post in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.